This is Impact with Don Wenner.
Hey everyone, Don Wenner here, founder and CEO of DLP Capital and host of the Impact Podcast. I'm excited to present episode 5 of the podcast, where we will take a deep dive into the jobs crisis in America. In this episode, we will be discussing the steps we need to take to help support entrepreneurship and fuel businesses and organizations to grow and add jobs. Let's shoot over to the conversation I had with Chuck Sacco. Chuck is an educator and entrepreneur at the Charles D. Close School of Entrepreneurship at Drexel University. At Drexel, Chuck runs many great initiatives, educates future entrepreneurs of America, and runs a startup incubator called the Baiada Institute of Entrepreneurship. The key takeaways from this episode are, number one, the role of automation in the jobs crisis and how entrepreneurs and small businesses will lead the way in developing jobs that might not even exist right now. Number two, how figuring out the market and the problem you are solving for is, as an entrepreneur, the most important aspect, even more so than figuring out your product. Number three, why corporate entrepreneurship may be the most critical aspect impacting the jobs crisis. And number four, how one of the most critical factors for entrepreneurs is building the right team within their organization and the right set of mentors. Here is my conversation with Mr. Chuck Sacco. All right, so Don Wenner here on Impact, and I have a great guest here today, Chuck Sacco. And Chuck, you have a quote here that I read recently. It said, "Everyone needs to be the entrepreneur of their life." So tell us what that means.
Don, it's a great question, and yes, I really believe everyone needs to be the entrepreneur of their life. And what that really means is it's really about taking ownership. It's about taking control. But it's about having a set of skills and personality attributes that you can really leverage to craft your career, no matter what you do. It doesn't matter if you want to start a brand new company. It doesn't matter if you're working inside a large organization. You've got to take ownership of everything around you and guide yourself from a goal perspective and set a series of goals, just as any entrepreneur will do, right? You're trying to achieve a series of objectives. You're trying to figure out the future. You're trying to figure out a game plan. So it's always about being goal-oriented, realizing that a lot of things are going to change along the way. So it's fighting through those challenges that you have. It's about being persistent and being resilient. But it's also about looking at opportunities around you and saying, hey, the world's changed. What can I capitalize on today that maybe was different from yesterday, and take your career forward in a very positive way? So it's really about, again, that goal orientation, and just keep driving yourself forward and just think and act like an entrepreneur no matter what you do.
I love that. So that reminds me, some of those comments reminds me of a fellow local professor, and Angela Duckworth, and her great book called Grit. So is that thinking in your mind aligned with the concept of grit?
It's certainly a big part of it, right? So that grit, being resilient, being persistent, being down and dirty when you need to be, becomes so important, right? Because so many things are not going to go your way, right? Look at everything that's happened over the past 15 months with COVID. If you don't have grit, you're not going to make it. So it's always about having that grit, that determination, that persistence as a way to keep driving yourself forward. And when things happen that are outside your control, it's like, okay, there's nothing I can do about that, but what can I do, right? What can I capitalize on? What are the new things that I need to do? And it goes back to my goal orientation comments a few minutes ago, which is your goals are going to change, right? You're going to have a set of goals and things are going to happen, and you're going to have to recast those goals. That's okay, right? Don't beat your head against the wall. Change your goals and sail off in a new direction. That's really, I think, what people like Angela talk about in terms of that grit. It's not just, doing it until you're beat up and bloody. It's realizing what's happening around you and keep pushing forward and change direction when you need to change direction.
Awesome. Yeah. And I think the best summary of grit that I've heard, I think it's Angela's definition, which is, passion plus perseverance towards long-term goals. But as you said, sometimes those goals are going to change. And that reminds me of another local professor and recent book. Have you had a chance to read Think Again by Adam Grant yet?
It's sitting right behind me.
It's a pretty awesome book, and it
Awesome.
reminds
I
me.
love Adam Grant. Yep.
Yeah, he's amazing, and it reminds me of thinking of sometimes the world's changing quickly around us, and that idea of kind of rethinking what you assume to be the set of options or situation or paths forward. It's really interesting a form of thought. So that leads in, we're talking here about jobs, and we're going through an environment of incredible change, and there's lots of different opinions on this, but I hear statistics anywhere from 30 to 50% of American jobs will be automated in the next 10 to 20 years, and whatever the exact percentage is, there's no doubt that a lot of industries and a lot of jobs are being automated. And how do you see that affecting the world of entrepreneurship? What do you see as the ways that we can create jobs in the country here today?
No, it's a great question. So this is something we look at obviously a lot when we think about entrepreneurship and where are the new opportunities. So a couple of things on automation. One is that automation initially displaced, let's say, the factory worker, right? Displaced some of those jobs that you could automate from a technical perspective. Now what's happening with new technology such as artificial intelligence, you're beginning to see the creative jobs are going to be displaced. You're going to see the managerial jobs are going to be displaced. That's where there's going to be a real, kind of interesting shift in the world. I recently saw a new technology platform that, with a few keywords will automate the design of a graphic. So now all of a sudden you think, man, that's going to change the need for graphic designers. Maybe we don't need as many of them, or the ones we do need are going to need to be the ones that are going to be very specialized and really super skilled. So technology is going to keep changing everything that we do and how we think about it. Another side of that, though, is, and this is something that people don't always think about, another side of this is that, and again, I forget the exact number, but it's something like 40% of all jobs that are going to be created over the next 10 years don't even exist yet, right? The roles don't exist, the types of jobs don't exist. And a good example we use for students to help them relate is like Uber driver, right? That wasn't a job 6 to 8 years ago. Now it's a job people can have because the technology didn't exist, the platforms didn't exist. So there's going to be new jobs, new opportunities. We just don't know what those are going to be. Now that goes back to what we first started talking about, Don, which is to be the entrepreneur of your life, looking at all these things around you and saying, okay, what's new, what's different, what can I capitalize on, and then reskill and upskill yourself constantly in a way that you can hopefully take advantage of the new things in the future. And technology is evolving so rapidly, and this becomes one of the other big challenges, is that it's very difficult now to go to college for 4 years, expect that you're going to have a job and a career in the same industry, in the same company, and never have to upskill and reskill. Those days are gone. You're going to have to constantly do that in order to stay relevant.
Well said. And I went to Drexel University and certainly did not expect to enter real estate as the path I ended up when I enrolled. To your point there, but right now we're in a state of high unemployment, high underemployment, long-term unemployment is a big crisis today. And then on top of that, as you just said, we have this tremendous automation coming, and many of the jobs that will be created we haven't even thought of yet, can't even think of yet. So you kind of alluded to this a bit already, but despite the fact that every good company out there today that I know of is desperately trying to find talent, right? They can't find enough talent, can't find enough good people to come work for them. Yet we have this, incredible unemployment, underemployment, and expected continued disruption through automation. So where's the disconnect? Why does every good entrepreneur, every good business leader, small business owner struggling to find good people? Yet there's a tremendous challenge with people finding work, or at least that's what it appears.
Yeah, I think it comes down to the skills gap, right? So the types of skills the companies need versus what's available on the market, there's just a mismatch there. And there's a lot of reasons for that. I think there's a lot of creative solutions that are being developed to try to fill those gaps. And you certainly see from a technology perspective, organizations, big companies like Amazon and Google, for essentially building their own workforce development capability, right? They're developing their own schools essentially to train the next generation of engineers because there just aren't enough of them out there. Universities can't spit them out quickly enough. But it's also, I think, there's a segment of the population that again, talking about upskilling and reskilling, just hasn't thought about those types of careers and have not had the pathways and the opportunities to get educated. So some of these gaps are being filled creatively, like I said, by entrepreneurs, oftentimes by big companies. I think universities will get there too, and recognizing that there's a much broader market opportunity for them than the traditional college market that they can go after and develop. And it's going to take time, right? It may take 10 years to kind of fill the gap, the void of, that connection between available jobs and the human capital that could be out there to fill those jobs, especially in the technology sector, because tech, as you know, Don, touches everything. You talk about real estate, or you think how much tech is in real estate now. It's incredible. You think about any deal, any transaction, anything that's happening. But you need you still need people to do a lot of that work. And automation, technology, AI will fill some of those gaps, but you're still going to need people to build the robots, right? So, you're going to have that out there.
So what do you see, outside of, roles specifically as a programmer or engineer in technology, what do you see as the jobs that will remain in demand or increase in demand in this next stage of automation and increase in productivity and all the ways that technology is going to permeate through our world?
It's going to be a lot in the creative area. I think creative realm, again, design and so forth are going to be really critical. You can automate so much technology development today, but there's still so much that is going to be handcrafted, still so much that's going to require customer support. You think about the customer support angle of anything, that becomes so critical. People that can resolve issues, problems, dilemmas in the technology as it gets rolled out. All those things are going to be really important, as well as just the front end side of it. You can be very good in technology, but also very good at selling, and you're going to have a leg up in the world because you're going to have that great mix of being able to engage with prospective customers, but also understand how technology works and the value that it can bring to an organization. So those types of skills, I think, ultimately are those are the harder ones to displace, where there's a lot of human interaction. Probably another area would be, I mention customer support. Customer support would be another big area. I think that as we roll out more and more technologies, you can automate a lot of support, but you still need somebody at the other end of an email, other end of a phone call, or other end of a text in order to really create that value and that connection with a client. So that stuff probably doesn't go away easily.
Awesome feedback. So you talked about how, maybe over the next, maybe it's 10 years that companies and universities and so forth start figuring out how to solve this gap between, skills and jobs that are available. And, probably, a little bit behind the curve here where we'd like to be. I think kind of similarly, we were a bit behind the curve here in the universities, as an example, in rolling out programs around entrepreneurship, right? And embracing, this need to educate on launching businesses. And that's come a long way. I know you've been a part of that, in lots of colleges. Universities now have schools around entrepreneurship, and that the topic of entrepreneurship is now, sexy and cool and exciting, and arguably was not just 10 years ago. But despite so many people wanting to start businesses and the entrepreneurial spirit being alive and well in the United States, we still have a tremendous small percentage of entrepreneurs that end up generating any level of scale or long-term success in the companies they launch. And if you disagree with that, please feel free to correct or give a different perspective. But what do you see the reasons why do so few entrepreneurs have success, and certainly have success on their their first or maybe even second go around and launching a company? What's the challenge that you see many run into?
One of the biggest challenges is that oftentimes you see entrepreneurs who they're building a product and they don't really have a good sense of the market. So one of the things we try to do at Drexel with our School of Entrepreneurship is to really be very customer and market focused. Always start every conversation, always start every idea with the customer. Customer first, customer forward. Figure them out first. Figure out their needs, their problems, their behaviors, and then figure out what the solution is. I think oftentimes the seduction for entrepreneurs is like, hey, I've got this idea for this new product, this new widget, this new service, and they go off and try to build it because they can, right? Because it's so much easier and cheaper to build anything today. We can build anything, but is there really a need there in the market? And how do you know that? What are your most critical assumptions that you've made about your customer, about the market, that if are wrong will kill this idea. So it's flipping the conversation. It's very much like in sales, right? Sales shouldn't be about you pitching your product, right? It should be about listening to the needs of your customer and working backwards. If you take that mindset as an entrepreneur, you're much more likely going to be successful than if you just start building things, because it's easier to build things than to have conversations with people. It goes back to what I said earlier, the people skills, right? What are the skills that won't go away? It's the people skills. It's the relationship skills. You're always going to need those. And the people that can, even if you have a technical background, can develop those people skills and that relationship skills, the much more likely you're going to be successful.
Awesome feedback. One of the things I've seen in young entrepreneurs, and young not necessarily by age, but new into the world of growing a business, is in the beginning stages of growing and launching a business. It's fun, it's exciting, and I see many entrepreneurs willing to work 100 hours a week, burn it all ends, put all their energy and effort around launching a business, and around the ideation stage and product creation stage, and then all of a sudden you have customers, and all of a sudden then you have issues to solve, and you get into now the challenge of incremental improvement and working through operations and hiring people and the stuff that's generally thought to be by those who glamorize getting into entrepreneurship not as much fun. And then it's very easy, as you said, it's never been easy to start a technology or start a company. So then it's easy to go and the grass is greener and go chase a new exciting product, thinking it's that's going to be a lot more fun and a lot easier, but only coming to the conclusion that ultimately all businesses are more similar than dissimilar in terms of the challenges that once you take that product to market and have customers and serve people and solve issues, it's hard work. And I think that stage of once you launch the business and you find a product that people want, being able to actually grow and scale isn't often as taught. What are your thoughts? Have you seen that to be a trend that keeps companies small and struggling to really gain scale and being willing to do the hard work of working through the challenges of growing an organization?
Sure. I mean, look, it's a different set of skills, right? So if you're a builder and somebody who's interested in just launching something and getting it off the ground, that's going to be potentially a different set of skills than if you're trying to then scale it to a certain level. And especially if you are the type of business that's raising capital, now you're bringing on board a bunch of capital. You've got to manage operations. You have to build business processes. You have to get systems in place. All those tend to be a different set of skills, which is why, as an entrepreneur, it's so important to build a great team, because the team is what's going to help you get there. So hiring someone who's going to be your great COO, hiring somebody who's going to be your great CFO, hiring those skill sets, even from an HR perspective, to help you build the programs and policies and everything that you need in place. It just becomes a different set of skills. And if you've not done it before, you don't know what to do. And therefore, you're more likely to make mistakes than not and falter along the way. And that's part of the gap in building great companies and growing them, is that you've not done it before. So you have to be smart enough about building a team. The team aspect of entrepreneurship is often underappreciated. And a lot of the data says that startups fail because of poor team dynamics. And if you don't get the team right, then you're going to struggle. And investors know that too, right? Smart investors know to bet on the team, because a great team can take a subpar product and make it good, versus a poor team can take a great product and make it fail. So look at the team. That becomes so critical.
Well said. I think about it as, in order for us to make an impact on this, crisis of jobs and automation that we're talking about here, we need entrepreneurs to come in with great new products, or, and to your point, good enough products, right? And be willing to build a great organization, a great team, and embrace that, the ability, the opportunity to hire people and get people to come join your purpose, your mission, is a great opportunity. It's a great blessing to be able to employ people. It's sure. People are our greatest assets. They're not our liability. And I don't think many entrepreneurs, when they set out, they think about growing a product and selling lots of it and maybe lots of revenue, but they're not often thinking, hey, I want to run a company with 100 employees, right? Or I want to grow a company with 500 employees. It's not generally what they think about when they're dreaming of this way that they're going to create some new products. So any thoughts there to recommendation for those who are going down the path of launching a company, how to embrace the challenge and the opportunity, especially when you've never done it before, of growing a large organization in terms of employing people and building teams and having that to be part of the vision of being an entrepreneur.
No, that's great, because you're right. Most entrepreneurs, I've been an entrepreneur multiple times through my career. You don't wake up every day and say, my goal is to have 100 employees and have all these HR headaches and deal with customer complaints, right? That's not your goal setting. And by the way, it goes back to a comment you made earlier. Again, I've been there. One of the best times as an entrepreneur is before you have sold anything, because everything is possible, right? Anything could happen. And it's a great time because, it's all very hopeful. And then you start to get customers and you have to build your team and so forth. And then, like we talked about earlier, parts of it get much harder. I think a good approach for this kind of speaks to building a great mentor network. Find people that aren't, it's not necessarily somebody that's been in business 40 years. Find other entrepreneurs that are maybe 2 to 3 years ahead of you on the growth curve. Find out what they're doing. How are they solving problems in their growth trajectory when they have hired their 10th person or their 50th person or their 100th person? Like, just stay just a little bit behind where they are. Find those companies and find out their trajectory. What's worked for them? What systems, processes? How do they go about doing things? Leverage that, because again, if you've not done it before, you're going to make a lot of mistakes. So try to learn from others and build a great peer mentor network. You want to have the other experts, you want to have your industry experts and your legal and accounting and so forth. But I'm a big fan of peer mentoring, and find those individuals that can really help you. We do that at Drexel within our startup incubator, and that our underclassmen entrepreneurs, we make sure that they're connected very well to our upperclassmen entrepreneurs. And not that the upperclassmen entrepreneurs are that experienced, but they still have 2 or 3 more experience than the underclassmen entrepreneurs. And that's a big difference. You can learn a hell of a lot over the course of a couple of years. So leverage that knowledge base as a young entrepreneur. I think that's really important.
Great point. So we have kind of a couple set types of listeners here who listen to our podcast. We have those who are looking to invest and make an impact through their capital with across these number of crises that we're focused on here at DLP. One of big ones here being jobs, and so as you think about talking to those listening here who don't want to go be an entrepreneur today, but want to impact this job crisis and may have had the track record or experience of growing a business or being a leader in an organization, what would you recommend to those who see this as our greatest opportunity to create jobs is through the support of great young entrepreneurs? What would you recommend them to do? How can they get involved? How can they mentor? How can they make a difference here with young entrepreneurs?
I would say, wherever you are, start local. Go find out where your local entrepreneurs hang out. What clubs or groups are they part of? Associations, organizations are they part of? Go meet with them, spend time with them, understand what they're doing, and just start in your backyard. You don't have to, worry about what's happening everywhere, but start in a realm that you can begin to understand and know the dynamics in that marketplace, and hopefully then find entrepreneurs that could be interesting to you. And just as every entrepreneur has to talk to 100 investors to get an investment, I think as an investor, you want to talk to 100 entrepreneurs to find that one that seems to make sense to you. But the more people, and I highly encourage everyone listening to this that is thinking about getting involved as an investor or a mentor, take those first steps and get involved. It's a big reason why I'm at Drexel within our School of Entrepreneurship, because I wanted to flip from being the entrepreneur now at this point in my life to focus on supporting entrepreneurs and helping develop them and hopefully make the world a better place through those efforts. And some of the other initiatives I'm involved with in other parts of the world, same thing. How can we have the experience, at least at a minimum, bring our expertise and our time, and then if it makes sense, bring the financial capital a little bit later. But start by spending the time. That's what's most important, and it's needed no matter what.
Awesome. So you're a great example of somebody who's gone from being an entrepreneur to now saying, "Hey, I'm gonna this next phase of my career, I want to go and make a bigger impact through the ability to help many entrepreneurs on their journey." So in your path of doing this over the last number of years, what gets you most excited? Being there, mentoring, supporting, being involved with all these young entrepreneurs. With I'm sure you hear a million different, I don't know, I was going to say great ideas, but at least good ideas a year. What gets you excited most in being on this journey with these entrepreneurs?
Yeah, it's Don. It's just the waking up every day and just knowing that you can make an impact, you can make a difference, you can be helpful. I think that's that's incredibly powerful. But I'd also say again, it goes back to the points I made earlier about getting involved. You're going to learn so much. Like I am way more up to date and relevant than my peers who aren't in this type of field because I know so much more about new technologies, new ideas, new business models, like how things work out there. That if you're not out there spending the time with young entrepreneurs, you're never going to know about what's happening. I know so much more than a lot of my peers who look at me like I have no idea what this stuff is, and it's like I can talk about this stuff and it's great. So getting involved, spending that time initially, just as a mentor, you're going to learn so much about what's happening. That's just going to make you sound smarter to your friends, if nothing else.
Awesome. So I know you've been a part of. You've seen a lot of new companies being started, a lot of new ideas come forward, and out of all those ideas and new companies launched, new technologies started. Small percentage of them become, big successes and really, take traction in the marketplace and really grow and turn into, real organizations, whether that be 20, 50, 100, 500, thousands of employees. So as you've had the opportunity of seeing many that sort of fail, at least in their first or second or so forth iteration, and those that have succeeded, what have you come to the conclusion? What are the things that kind of differentiate the ones that are successful? And are you able at this point in your career to see that early on in the process? Can you kind of tell if they have the makeup of the right ingredients to be successful early on? How do you think about that as you see so many trying with excitement and a glimmer in their eye to launch a new business? What have your kind of experience taught you on what it takes to be successful and what tends to work and where challenges tend to lie?
Yeah, Don, that's a great question too. I think when you do enough of this, you start to develop pattern recognition skills, and you start to see things within the first 2 minutes of a conversation that you kind of have a sense of whether or not this is something that's going to make it. So one is obviously go back to the team. As I said earlier, if someone's walking in the door and it's a team that they've built and they seem to have a great relationship and understand what they're doing, at least as best they can at this stage, that's a good indicator. If they also have an inbuilt network, we'll have some students that come to us and they just have a great network even in college, and it's the network outside the university, right? They've got friends and families and friends of their parents that they're connected to that they can point to that are going to be helpful to them. Timing is also pretty critical when you think about the types of ideas. The timing of it. You don't want to be too early, you don't want to be too late. So is this an idea that it's like super duper out there futuristic stuff that everybody's jazzed about, but it's just way too early to build a market because you have to educate the market? Or it's too late, it's already entrenched competitors. You already have Amazon kind of fully baked into that part of the ecosystem, and it's just going to be too hard to displace competition. So probably those three areas. It's going to be team and network, and then timing become probably two of the most critical areas that we look at. But then the third is going to be who have you spoken with, right? What do you know about your customer? And if you start the conversation with, let me tell you about my customer and the problem they have, that's a good indicator that, okay, this is somebody that, probably has a pretty good sense of where they can go and how they can do it.
Awesome. Yeah, that's phenomenal feedback. So there's a lot of phenomenal books out there on entrepreneurship. What are the go-to? What are the favorites that you recommend for those thinking about going down the path of launching a business or on that journey already?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many great ones. So a couple of courses or books I use in courses. One is called Discipline Entrepreneurship. by Bill Olet. Bill Olet's out of MIT, especially if you're an innovation-driven entrepreneurial opportunity, technology-based primarily. Disciplined entrepreneurship gives you a significant number of tools and frameworks to help guide you through that process. And what are the things that you need to be really doing and thinking about become really critical. Also highly recommend, there's two ebooks by, what's the author's name? I'm trying to remember her name, but one's called Talking with Humans, and the other is called Testing with Humans. Those are two very good ebooks that focus on that whole we call customer discovery and development journey. And really, again, put you in the driver's seat when you think about how you develop your customer and what are your most riskiest assumptions that you have to really de-risk in order to prove whether or not this is an opportunity. And then the third one I'd recommend is Sell More Faster by Amy Schwartzfarb. Sell More Faster is basically, it's very good for entrepreneurs. If you've never been involved in sales, especially business to business type sales, this is a great primer on how to sell, but also how to build a great sales team, which again is one of the hardest things to do as an entrepreneur, especially if you're not sales oriented. But it's going to be so critical to do that.
So I'm going to switch it up here a little bit. So a great quote by Bill Hewitt, the co-founder of Hewlett-Packard, is more companies die of indigestion than starvation. And, in the beginning stages of entrepreneurship, the concern is all about, being able to stay alive, get enough customers, raise enough capital. But many of the greatest companies that we from the past ended up dying of indigestion, not from a lack of customers or a lack of capital. How do you think about that?
Look, I mean, it's, that's a lot of research has gone into this in terms of, what happens to established companies and what gets entrenched in terms of their culture and their processes, where they don't see competition, right? You don't see it coming from the other angle. So, somebody take, Kodak is a great example, right, of a company that just didn't see it coming, or BlackBerry, Research in Motion, which is the company behind BlackBerry, just didn't see the iPhone coming and just deluded themselves into thinking they could fight through that. We actually teach this within our School of Entrepreneurship. We focus on corporate innovation and entrepreneurship as a kind of a sub-discipline within entrepreneurship. And it's really about company culture and developing early on those processes and environment that support new ideas, new innovation, and that you're willing to kill the cash cow, which is obviously so hard to do. You have if you're a big company, you may have gone public. You have shareholders, you have boards, you have all these things that you have to develop and report to, and it becomes hard then to kind of see where competition is coming from, which oftentimes isn't going to be direct competition, right? Take the hotel industry. Who would have thought that Airbnb would be the biggest competitor? So Marriott's biggest competitor isn't Hyatt, right? It's Airbnb. So to be able to look at those things and have people that are kind of paying attention to the ecosystem becomes so critical, but then having internal processes and environments to support the development of ideas has to become part of every company's DNA, right? Most companies, I forget the exact number, but any company's ability to stay on the S&P 100 or maybe it's S&P 50, like that time keeps shrinking and shrinking and shrinking, right? Which means if you're not a company thinking about the future, if you're just thinking about your current products and services, you're not going to make it. Awesome
feedback. One of the best books on that topic, I'm sure you've read, Innovator's Dilemma. By Clayton Christensen. Yeah, phenomenal book. So that brings me to my last question then, and it sounds like so it was just awesome to hear that you guys are teaching on these topics above and beyond the kind of startup world that people think of entrepreneurship. But a term that I've used, and you kind of alluded to this in the beginning with that first quote, is entrepreneurship versus intrapreneurship.
Yep.
And whether you're a leader or a team member within a large organization today, being able to utilize the skills of entrepreneurship within a large organization, or maybe you're not yet part of a large organization, but you don't want to be the person per se out in front. You don't have the dream or the exact vision, but want to be a part of supporting an entrepreneur. How do you think about that concept of being an intrapreneur and versus being an entrepreneur, and the opportunities and need for those intrapreneurs in today's society?
Oh, it's absolutely huge, and it may sound counterintuitive, but with our School of Entrepreneurship, you can focus on new venture creation. You can focus on what's called social entrepreneurship, which is more nonprofit type entities, but then corporate entrepreneurship. And most of our students, and again, this may sound counterintuitive, focus on corporate entrepreneurship and innovation. Wow. And because I think they see the value that they can bring to companies, and especially a school like Drexel with our co-op system and very job focused and career focused, is that you can add a lot of value. And I think companies today, and it goes back to things we talked about earlier about automation and so forth, companies today don't need rote work, right? They don't need the kind of robotic skills. They need the creative skills. They need the innovation skills. They need the entrepreneurial skills inside their organizations. Otherwise, they're going to become the dinosaurs overnight. So who better to do that than those individuals that can think and act entrepreneurially and can bring value to an organization? And as an individual, then you have that, I would call safety net, but you especially coming out of college, you have a foundation, right? You can build up a nest egg, you can build your network, you can learn about an industry, and then maybe 5-10 years down the line, you know enough to be dangerous to launch a new idea, maybe in the industry you've been working, because you know all about it and you've built that network and cash to be able to take that idea forward. That's a fantastic pathway to be an entrepreneur. Go get experience in an industry, go learn what it's about, build your network. You'll be so much better skilled, and then hopefully you'll have a much higher chance of success when you go and launch a new idea.
Awesome. Well, that's some phenomenal feedback. I had no idea that the school involved both corporate entrepreneurship and social. Would not have thought that corporate entrepreneurship would have been the leader, but that makes phenomenal sense. Very very different perspective than I would have guessed. And for anybody who doesn't know, I went to Drexel myself before the entrepreneurship school, but we have multiple interns or co-op members here at DLP right now. And that's another great way for those of you growing businesses, support entrepreneurship is Drexel has, of course, I'm biased as I know Chuck is, arguably the best internship program in the country. Yeah. And it's a great place to bring entrepreneurship into your organization for sure. So this has been an absolute pleasure, Chuck. I'm going to turn it to you. Any last words to conclude us here with today?
I think it would just end as we started. And that is, again, you really think about yourself as being an entrepreneur, no matter what you're doing. And, when you start to shift your mind that way, a lot of good things will start to happen, because you'll really then begin to look at the world, not in terms of what are the challenges and all the bad stuff, but look at the world in terms of the opportunities and what's changing and how can we solve problems, right? There's always going to be problems to solve. Think of yourself as a problem solver. Think of yourself as an entrepreneur, no matter what you're doing. And that will, I think, dramatically change not only what you do, but how you think. And ultimately, I think in terms of successes that you'll have down the line.
That's a great way to conclude is right. Too many people get sucked in the mindset of a victim or being concerned about what happens to you, but real success comes from deciding what you do with what happens to you, right? What you do next. And we've never been in more control of our own destinies than we are today. Yeah. So phenomenal.
And last day, one quick thing, Don, I'll say just
go ahead.
My mind, I know sometimes there's that, we should say no to lots of things. My mind used to say yes to everything. Say yes, because you never know where that's going to lead. That's why I'm here at Drexel, because I said yes to something. I'm a software technologist by background. How I ended up here is just because I said yes to a lot of things along the way.
That's phenomenal feedback. And I'm going to give one last comment there. I have the pleasure of having Brad Stolberg here on the show, who's a phenomenal author of Passion Paradox and Peak Performance. And we talked about the topic of grit, which is a sexy topic. I think today it's one of our core values. But what he talks about is how important it is, especially in the beginning of your career, to test different things, find out what you're really passionate about before you set those long-term goals. And you alluded to this a bit earlier of something that's going to change, right? And being open to testing and experiencing different things, and kind of firing bullets. Having that mindset will lead to tremendous success and fulfillment. So phenomenal advice. So thank you, Chuck. It's been an honor. Hope to have you on here once again. Thanks.
Thanks, Don.
This has been Don Wenner on the Impact Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode. You can check out our other episodes by subscribing wherever you get your podcast or on YouTube, or check us out online by going to impactwithdon.com. I encourage and challenge you to make an impact.